right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. As always, I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you've never checked us out before, my name is Billy Dees, and we are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast. You can find the Billy Dees podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found, and we're always so glad when you do. We're going to talk about any number of things. Today's going to be a commentary podcast, and it's part of our kind of weekly show. Sometimes they're live, sometimes they're in studio. We're in studio today. This is October 11th, 2025, and in the production cycle between October 11 and 12, we're putting this together. And a number of different topics today we're going to cover. I'm also going to go back. Had a wonderful interview episode in the playlist before this one. And prior to that, it was another one where I covered any number of different events. And I spoke about my good friend, Jimmy Kimmel. The only friend that I have that's better is Keith Olbermann, who infamously blocked me a while back for whatever reason. He probably had a good reason, right? But I got to tell you, the show has been in its current form for about 10 years. And over the years, I've said some crazy stuff. Even by my estimation, I'll go back and check out an episode that's 3 or 4 years old. And I'll say, you know what, Bill, that was pretty crazy. Pretty crazy stuff. But I have, I'm not sure how far back, but with what I said about Jimmy Kimmel, I have gotten more backlash over than anything else. You know, it's like this Jimmy Kimmel thing was, he's a patron saint of some kind of bullshit. And so I want to make sure people understand where I was coming from a couple of weeks ago when I did that episode, primarily about Jimmy Kimmel. I talked about other things during that program, but I'm going to kind of retread some of that and cover it again. And in the process of retreading the Jimmy Kimmel thing and trying to clarify a few things there, I'm going to talk about what he said about Antifa, which is part of another new broad narrative that I've been noticing. So a lot to go through. First and foremost, as of October 11th, 2025, the big news is the peace deal in Gaza. A lot of people were involved in this. And one of the things that I try to cover, I try to point out, is hypocrisy and how we choose the news that we want to hear. And when I say both sides, figuratively speaking, you know, we're talking the far right, the far left, but there's a lot in between. And a lot of people are guilty of this. When we evaluate a situation, if someone we don't like is put in a favorable light, when the spotlight shines wonderfully on them, we have a tendency to minimize it or ignore it. But if somebody we don't like has a negative light put on them on the stage, boy, we just love that. And I hear so much, and I have a few guests swirling in the wind that are going to come on and talk about this with all of the hatred and some of the stuff that's gone on online lately. A lot of people have said, well, can we find common ground? Can we find common ground? For the first time ever, I'm starting to wonder if that's possible. I'll get into more of that later. Let's get into this thing going on now with Gaza. The hope certainly is that this is going to hold. I am not too quick to break out the party hats yet and say peace has arrived, because especially in that area of the world, peace is often a very temporary thing. As a matter of fact, as hopefully peace is coming to Gaza, What's happening right now on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border is that there's problems brewing there, and the Taliban is deploying reinforcements to the front line amid heavy fighting with Pakistani forces. So it seems like there's always something going on. But as far as Gaza goes, this is the first real breakthrough we've had in 2 years. Okay. Here again, shining a light. I don't know how anyone can analyze this. You can give credit to a lot of people, including Arab nations and so on and so forth. A lot of people contributed very positively to this whole process. But one of the people is Donald Trump. And here again, if you're new to this program, I have never been a yay Trump. I wouldn't describe myself as MAGA, but when you evaluate these things, I don't know how you cannot mention Donald Trump. Let's check out what a former President Barack Obama, let's check out what he said. After 2 years of unimaginable loss and suffering for Israeli families and the people of Gaza, we should all be encouraged and relieved that an end to the conflict is within sight, that those hostages still being held will be reunited with their families, and that vital aid can start reaching those inside Gaza whose lives have been shattered. More than that, though, it now falls on Israelis and Palestinians, with the support of the United States and the entire world community, to begin the hard task of rebuilding Gaza, and to commit to a process that, by recognizing the common humanity and basic rights of both peoples, can achieve a lasting peace. Now, I would, I guess that's very eloquent. I believe that most of us can agree with the sentiments of that. But I find it very odd that in all of this talk, that Donald Trump's name is not even mentioned. It's like he had nothing to do with it. It just it happened after 2 years. This moment has finally arrived, like the weather. It just arrived today. We had 70 degrees and a bright sunny day. It just happened. I find that very odd. And I also find it very odd that the Free Palestine people, you would certainly presume, have something very nice to say about it, right? Well, I don't know.
Where's the Free Palestine crowd? Where are the people who have played the What About Palestine game every single time a human tragedy has happened ever since Donald Trump has been in office? The people that protested relentlessly. The people that cut off any family and friends who didn't put a Palestine flag in their bio. The people that harassed influencers and anybody with a platform to speak out against freeing Palestine because that was all that they cared about. Well, Donald Trump has brokered a peace deal for peace in the Middle East, so now what? Why do I hear crickets? Why don't I hear you? It's like you can't give credit where credit is due. Shouldn't you be celebrating? Isn't this what you wanted? Isn't this what you have been crying for?
Well, it is what they have been crying for, so to speak. And here again, even with going into this cautiously, hoping that the peace deal in Gaza holds, and in that region of the world it could break apart at any time. But this is the most positive inroad we have had in a long time. And you would certainly expect some optimism from all sides, getting back to that term again, from all sides on this, that, hey, this is a great thing. Maybe we can build on this. But no, as a matter of fact, there are still protests happening. And the fact of the matter is that we have people whose mission it is now, getting back to finding common ground. You would feel that no matter what side you are on when it comes to the conflict in Gaza, that you would be happy for peace. You would be happy for killing to stop. But apparently this is a point of contention because they've flat out said that they're not going to stop. And there's a lot of protests and people still not happy, mostly in Western countries over this. From what I can tell, and who knows what the exact truth is, there is a lot of relief in the Gaza area and in Israel. Here again, though, there's always tensions in that region, so it's always hard to put on the party hats. But this is a positive step, and you would certainly expect someone to mention the name of Donald Trump, a former president in particular, and you would certainly expect some of the people that have been calling for a ceasefire for how long and complaining about the fact that the United States was involved with Israel and the ceasefire wasn't happening. You would expect them to say, finally, good. We're glad, but you don't get it. And you don't get it because I always question the motives of people who are in a constant state of protest. Their existence, their happiness is derived from creating unrest. You are never going to make them happy. There is always going to be some sort of a problem. When you get one thing resolved, it's another thing. There is never a point when the smallest amount of progress is acknowledged. And I ran across this clip, and I wanted to share it with you. Now, this isn't specific to Gaza, but with the protests in general around the world regarding the Middle East, this was an interesting thing, and I wanted to share this with you.
Iranian here with another pro tip for anyone who's not from the Middle East. No one in the Middle East actually blocks intersections to pray in the streets and yell Allahu Akbar. The reason that they do it in your countries is because they're trying to assert their religious dominance over you and claim your country and turn it into Sharia law. Now you know.
Okay, again, that's just an example, but it's to me, it very clearly illustrates what I'm talking about with the constant state of unrest that we always seem to have. There is always a reason for people to lay in the street, whether it's ICE or something else. There is never a time when somebody says, okay, we got what we wanted, we're happy now. It just doesn't. We move on to the next thing, like the soup du jour. The old joke, what's the soup du jour? Well, I don't know, but it's they have it every day. Okay. And this is exactly what the protests are now. What's this protest about? Well, I don't know, but we have one every day. And it's hard for me to believe that there's middle ground when the issues of the day aren't really what people are striving for. They're striving to get a political agenda advanced, to make the other side look bad, to undermine any progress that's happening, and that is their goal. So this kind of leads into what I was talking about earlier with what happened with me with the Jimmy Kimmel thing. Let's start. Well, I'm going to very clearly stress this. In and of and by itself, what Jimmy Kimmel said, and we're going to get into exactly what that was, about Charlie Kirk, wasn't really a free speech issue per se. What it was about was this happened on a broadcast network. And there was a time when broadcast airwaves had a certain standard that the common good had to be served. When Jimmy Kimmel made the comment about the shooter involving Charlie Kirk, he was not trying to make a joke. He was not trying to be generally funny. He was trying to advance a political ideology. He was trying to sway people. And here again, in the context of free speech, that may be fine. But on the broadcast airwaves, getting back to the common good, when you are constantly going at topics from the same angle, you're going after the same people all the time, then how you're serving the common good starts to be called into question. The other thing is that the airwaves are not only supported indirectly through tax dollars and how the government manages the FCC, but they are financed when it comes to networks by advertising dollars. And advertisers have interests. You are beholden to the advertisers. This isn't so much of a free speech issue. For example, if you get hired to work at the local hardware store, okay, and you're a greeter, people come in and they say, well, I'm looking for water heaters. All right. And your job is to direct them to the water heaters. Your job is not to talk about President Trump. But you continually strike up conversations and provoke the customers with political talk. And your boss says, hey, you got to shut up about these politics. That's not what we're paying you to be here for. You are here on our time. You are representing this hardware store. And this hardware store does not have a political opinion. We have hammers, screwdrivers, drills, pipes, electrical fittings. That is what we want you talking about. And you turn around and do it again and you get fired. That is not a violation of your free speech. You can still go out into the street and talk about Donald Trump as much as you want, okay? With that being said, he is beholden to the advertisers. And when you have network programming, just like with radio stations now, there's not just the individual station that's involved. So you have a network affiliate in your local town, which may or may not be directly owned by the network. That might be owned by another media conglomerate that owns 10 different network stations across the country, just like a single restaurant entity can own more than one Burger King franchise or McDonald's franchise or whatever. So there's different layers to people getting upset. And when you push the right buttons and you get into trouble, it's not necessarily a free speech issue. Now, as I said in the prior podcast, Donald Trump ran his mouth too much, as he often does, and I wish he wouldn't have. I wish he wouldn't have made any public statements at all. The general understanding is that the FCC and the government was not directly involved in this, and I would actually hope they weren't. But there were other factors involved in this, and this happened because he played it kind of fast and loose with the facts. Now, let's start there. This is where I'm going to start, because it's going to lead into Antifa, which Jimmy Kimmel was involved in another controversy about that just the other day. And we're going to get into what that was. But keep in mind, this is shortly after the shooting involving Charlie Kirk. This is what the authorities said.
Robinson's mother explained that over the last year or so, Robinson had become more political and had started to lean more to the left, becoming more pro-gay and trans rights oriented.
Okay, so again, this was the climate. You not only had the authorities come out and state the facts that were available at the time, and you had these people saying these horrible things. And getting back to what I was saying about finding common ground, I don't know how you find common ground with that.
Hey MAGA, how bad does it hurt? The Jimmy Kimmel's back, but you guys can't get your person back.
Charlie Kirk family. Did you see all that blood that came out of his body? It was like, whoa. I'm not saying that violence isn't the way.
Everyone's saying that we are Charlie Kirk. Y'all sound like y'all want to meet the same fate he met. We are Charlie Kirk. You can meet the same fate.
Bitches, let's all join hands and bow our heads in thoughts and prayers for Charlie Kirk. Thoughts and prayers for Charlie Kirk. Thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and
Yeah, there's some real sweethearts there. That last one in particular, that she has that vocal fry with a little bit of maniacal tinge to it. Charlie Kirk.
In thoughts and prayers for Charlie Kirk.
But this was the climate. This was what a lot of the people who really liked Charlie Kirk and followed him, they were being exposed to this. And then Jimmy Kimmel comes out and says something that isn't exactly right. He not only assigns blame to an entire group of people, but he does so wrongly. Okay? And if we're gonna get into a debate about what he said, well, let's just check in with it.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Okay, that's pretty much what he said right there. And you got to keep in mind the sensitivities, the shock of what happened to Charlie Kirk, and even people who didn't necessarily follow him were stunned by what happened to him, as was I. What a horrible thing to play out in front of a bunch of young people. How awful is that? That is something that we all should universally be able to say. All right. So that shock is still very fresh when he said this. He said it on the heels of what the official accounts were, and he countered to that, blamed an entire political group that he doesn't agree with, and he did it in a fashion that to me was very glib. And this wasn't comedy. This wasn't funny. He was editorializing. He was trying to sway public opinion. And here again, getting back to broadcast standards, is this in the common good going over the airwaves? Is this disrupting any number of broadcast entities? Is this causing waves with the advertisers? This isn't so much of a free speech issue. As I explained on the last podcast, I got into trouble with broadcast standards for a sound effect years ago. And I didn't fight it. I took it down. Now, Jimmy Kimmel could have come back on and taken some personal responsibility for this. Instead, he talked about it in the very broad sense, about the circumstances. And I understand why people felt this way. There was no, I'm sorry I said this, I shouldn't have done it. And for my estimation, there should have been some version of that. But there wasn't. And I guess that's okay. If you're a big fan of Jimmy Kimmel, you say he has nothing to apologize for, and that's fine. But then don't make him out to be a martyr because he sacrificed nothing. This was a self-inflicted controversy that he did over the tragic death of a young man, and he was not martyred. In fact, he benefited from it. When he came back to say whatever it was that he said, trying to explain what happened, his ratings skyrocketed. Now, I did predict that his ratings would initially spike, and they did when he came back. And I kind of figured they would roll off kind of like a bell curve. And they've done that, but it's hard to say. I believe we're going to have to check this again in about 3 months to see where his baseline returned, if it was higher or lower than before. We'll just have to wait to find out. But this was not somebody who was martyred. This was not somebody who was hardly negatively impacted at all, quite frankly. So what happens this week? Well, my good friend Jimmy Kimmel spoke again. And this time about Antifa. And if you don't know what Antifa is, well, that's a good thing because according to him, it doesn't exist.
There's no Antifa. This is an entirely imaginary organization. There is not an Antifa. This is no different than if they announced they rounded up a dozen Decepticons. We've captured the Chupacabra, everyone.
Okay, well then, what in the hell are all these people talking about?
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, there's, no organization is perfect. There was some violence.
They are strictly principled anti-fascists. And what they see in the Trump administration and what they see happening in this country, they see the neo-fascism that we see.
There's a group of anti-fascists called the Black Bloc, which do tend to get violent. Their idea is, look, nonviolence hasn't worked, and we are going to try to stop this.
I think that a lot of people recognize that when pushed, self-defense is a legitimate response to white supremacist and neo-Nazi violence.
All right, now I get it. Antifa isn't exactly an organization that's listed on the stock exchange. They don't have a board of directors. They're not publicly traded. I get it. It's not that kind of an entity. But it is a something. That last person on that clip, Mark Bray, author, Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook. Boy, that sounds really serious, but apparently it's about nothing now. Antifa does have a flag. They have a logo. They have chapters in almost every major city. They have a unified ideology and have been a part of most of the major protests for about the last 5 or 10 years. But they really don't exist, and it must be because that's what Jimmy Kimmel says. All right, getting back to how things can change. No one is above the law.
No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law. And it is my responsibility and my duty and my job to enforce it. The law is both powerful and fragile. And today in court, we will prove our case. I thank you all for being here. And again, justice will prevail. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to get into all the legal details of what everything Donald Trump was involved in, but obviously there was the hush money scandal, and there was the value that was placed on Mar-a-Lago when leveraging some real estate and bank loans and some other things. Okay, and as you heard Letitia James very clearly say, no one is above the law. Now, let's hear how she now is involved in some real estate issues. I don't know how much merit they have and how much they don't, quite frankly. But let's listen to how real estate and values of real estate, they're really not a big deal.
And we're still getting the details, but if it's related to this mortgage issue, I mean, this is something that everyone in America, or many people at least, if you're lucky enough to be able to buy a house in America, you deal with this. Right? The federal government doesn't go after all of these people for doing this.
Oh, absolutely. We all misrepresent what our properties are worth, and we all cheat on our taxes, and we do all of these other kind of things. No big deal at all. Getting back to the hush money, the hush money, that one involving Trump really kind of stuck in my side. Because I could say the same thing. There are a lot of people in this country and in this world who cheat on their spouse. And I'm certainly not saying it's right. I don't like any form of dishonesty, but a lot of people do it. And in the process, they juggle around receipts. They don't want receipts popping up on credit card bills for hotels and other places. So they play a little game with the bookkeeping. Everybody does it. And for some reason, with Donald Trump, in regard to that hush money scandal, this rose to the level of having to indict a former president of the United States. And if it was anybody else, would it have happened? In my opinion, no. And quite frankly, with these cases in general involving Donald Trump, they probably wouldn't have happened either if they were anybody else, and it's not just my opinion.
Attorney General's case in New York, frankly, should have never been brought. And if his name was not Donald Trump, and if he wasn't running for president, I'm the former AG in New York, I'm telling you that case would have never been brought. And that's what is offensive.
Quite frankly, at this moment in time, I do not know how much merit the charges against Letitia James have. I really don't. And if you feel the charges against her are political retribution, then my question to you would be, how is it retribution? How did the retribution get started? Let's go back a year when Donald Trump was being prosecuted for fudging receipts involving getting laid. Did this rise to something that a former president should be indicted on? Was this starting a war under false pretenses? Was this lying to Congress, doing some horrendous thing internationally? Where on the scale does fudging the receipts about a sexual encounter rise to that level? So my question to you is this: where were you then? Well, you didn't like Donald Trump, so you didn't give a shit. And here again, I am not necessarily a pro-Trump, yay, MAGA person. That's not me, but I'm being practical here. If you think that playing politics with the judicial system and indictments and charges and district attorneys, if you feel that shouldn't be politicized, it shouldn't be politicized for Letitia James, and it shouldn't be politicized for Donald Trump. You let those precedents get through because you hated Donald Trump, and now those precedents are set. And I believe it's a bad thing for America now because, as I said, I don't know. I don't know how well-founded these charges are. And the fact that I don't know is because these precedents now have been started. Everything now is how can we get the guy or the woman that we don't like? It's not a matter of what's best for America. This is why I'm skeptical about this coming together thing. I know a lot of people in the wake of the horrible thing that happened to Charlie Kirk, a lot of people are saying, well, we need to talk. We need to have things out. We need to find common ground. And I'm hopeful. I would certainly hope that the horrible tragedy that happened to Charlie Kirk would have some good come out of it. I would hope that is the case. But the practical side of me says there's no dealing with these people. These people that are upset about Letitia James, having charges put against her, will not in any way, shape, or form, even one little molecule of their being, will they acknowledge that some of the stuff that happened to Donald Trump last year was questionable. They simply will not acknowledge it. And that's the problem. That's the problem we have in this country. It isn't just the politicians. We have people now who are ingrained in their own reality, in their own personal code of ethics, where winning, their side winning, is what matters. You losing is what's important. And that is a shame. I have mentioned before, I've been around a fair amount of time. I can remember Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill. I can even, more recently, Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich. They had their differences, to be sure. But they lived in the same universe, playing by the same rules of physics. Up was up, down was down. There were things that they could acknowledge about what the other side was saying. And even the most simplistic things, like a violent act committed against somebody who is sitting in front of a crowd trying to have a conversation. There are people who simply cannot say, oh my God, that's terrible. They can't bring themselves to do it. And I wish I could say that it's just a small fringe. No, it's not. It was a small fringe in the 1980s, and it might have been somewhat of a larger small fringe in the 1990s. But it is a sizable group now. These, especially on the far left, they exist everywhere in every different political spectrum. But right now on the far left, there's no reasoning. There's no acknowledging of any given point. All that matters is this cult-like ideology. And I don't know where it's going. Anyway, I am Billy Dees. Thank you very much for checking out our podcast this week. More interviews, more discussions are coming your way very soon. Actually, we're getting into a time of year that I really enjoy. I don't particularly like cool weather. I'm not a fan of that at all, but I do enjoy, media starts to become more vibrant. You have your primetime TV coming back. People are paying more attention to media in general because their attention has turned indoors. And it's an exciting time. And I enjoy that part of it. Our ratings, our listens, whatever you want to call it, of the podcast have a tendency to go up during the fall season. So it's an exciting time, to be sure. Do stay with us. You can find the Billy Dees podcast. We've been around now for over 10 years. The podcast in its current form, I've been doing this for longer than 10 years. But the podcast in its current form is about 10 years old. So we have a long history on all the major podcast platforms. I don't care which one is the one you listen to. We are on there. Just simply search the Billy Dees podcast. You can find me on X, which is the old Twitter, at Billy Dees. That's kind of like my social media home. I do have some links in my bio there. You can find other social media that I am on, but I'm going to say X is pretty much the one I focus on, in my opinion, because of the fact that it is so trending driven. It is so news driven. It is so real time driven. It is perfect for what we do here on the podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and we will talk to you again very, very soon.
Thank you for listening to the Billy Dees podcast. Follow Billy Dees on X, at Billy Dees, for updates about the program.
Do you listen to music or audiobooks on streaming devices such as Sonos or Amazon speakers? How about on your car sound system? If you use Spotify, Audible, or Amazon Music on any of these systems, you can also listen to the Billy Dees podcast the same way. Billy and his team go the extra mile to make sure our podcasts sound as good or better than anything on the radio. Listening to the Billy Dees podcast has never been easier. You literally just have to ask.